Hey, welcome back to Common Knowledge, the show where I look at some Magic the Gathering commons and tell you, are they good in Pauper? And the answer is mostly no. But some of them are, and maybe we'll get one of those today. Let's click random and find out. What is our first card going to be? Anytime now. There we go. It is Blister Spit Gremlin. Great name. It is a 1/1 gremlin for a single red mana, and it also has 1 and tap for this creature to deal 1 damage to each opponent, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, untap this creature. This is almost good, but it's not. This is kind of like a gutter snipe or a Kessig flame breather, or even like a black mage's rod. That's in black, but it is similar in that it just deals these little pings of 1 damage. I think Kessig is non-creature spell. Gutter Snipe is instant or sorcery. Black Mage's Rod is also non-creature spell. So closer to Kessig and Black Mage's Rod here. The difference is the Kessig and Black Mage's Rod ones are automatic. Those just are activated, or those are triggered abilities where they just happen whenever you cast a non-creature spell. This one you gotta pay for, and I guess it's nice that, well, actually, it's a little bit different because I guess you're tapping this before you play the non-creature spell, and then you're untapping this, and you can tap it again. So it's a little bit different in that way. Also, you don't have to have had the non-creature spell to do the damage in the first place. I guess that's different and less bad than I thought about before. It also costs 1 red mana. I'm thinking about like a Tim. I think I've talked about Tims before. Prodigal Sorcerer. There's also like a Prodigal Pyromancer from Time Spiral or from Planar Chaos, which does the same thing, where it's just a free tap to deal 1 damage. That goes to any target. This one just goes to opponent. But those Prodigal Sorcerer and Prodigal Pyromancer, they cost 3, and they're still 1/1s. This only costs 1. But it doesn't just cost 1, because you are paying the 1 each time to use the ability. I do like the way that you can tap, untap, tap, untap, tap, untap. But it's going to end up being pretty mana intensive to a point that I'm not sure that's what you necessarily want. I mean, you could play 4 Manamorphose with this, which is a sorcery, I believe, that it costs 2, and you just make 2 mana and you draw a card. So it kind of just cycles itself for free. So you're spending the mana here. You're doing the damage. You're playing Manamorphose, which is more or less a free spell. You get to untap this thing. You get to tap it again. So that could end up being meaningful damage. The question is whether that's worth it from a 1-drop. And I think the answer is it's not quite worth it. There's just better 1-drops. There's a lot of really good 1-drops in Pauper, and I think you'd play them all over this one. I do think this is interesting, though. I'll give it a better score than you might imagine. I think I'd give this a 4. Maybe even like a 4.2, just because I think it does actually have a little bit more potential. But it is a bit of an odd duck. But it is interesting. Also, the gremlin. Like, how many gremlins can you think about in? Can you recall from Magic the Gathering off of your top of your head? I feel like, was there 1 in Duskmourn maybe, but like not a lot. There aren't a whole lot of gremlins. That's a interesting creature type. All right, let's move on. We've talked enough about this. Let's go to Escape Roots for 2 and a blue. It's an enchantment, and for another 2 and a blue, you can return target white or black creature you own to its owner's hand. Interesting. We've seen bounce decks are very popular in Pauper. There are also specifically Esper ones, which are these colors, blue, black, and white, that are really popular right now because of Cryogen Relic from Edge of Eternities has turned all of your Orzhov Blade decks into Esper bounce decks. And this is too expensive. Again, we'll we have to keep using the E word here. It's too expensive. to really fit in those decks. But also, it's a very repeatable way of doing that. Imagine having your core Skyfisher, the creature that is able to, when it enters the battlefield, you bounce a permanent back to your hand, or the glitter hawk. That's not what it's called. I forgot the name of it, but it's the one mana hawk that you play, and you have to bring an artifact back to your hand. Which in Pauper, those generally are both benefits to have those bounce things back to your hand, because you're bouncing something that you'll just play again for even more value, like a Tithing Blade that you can then replay and force your opponent to sacrifice another creature, or your for the blue stuff, your Cryogen Relic, so you can bounce it back, and when it leaves play, it draws you another card. Really cool that this just is a way to always have that. You could also do this with ninjutsu creatures, which could be kind of cool. I guess it would be harder with ninjutsu because you could only do the black ninjas. Most of the ninjas that you want to play in Pauper are all blue. It's the Moon Circuit Hacker. That's what it's called, and then the Ninja the Deep Hours, and those are both blue. So you wouldn't be able to bounce those. You'd have to use the rat one that is like a 3/2 lifelinker. I think there might also be like a 5/5. Maybe that's uncommon, but you could end up using those to like bounce your ninjas back to your hand, so you could re-ninjutsu them again. It's a little cute. Again, thing is that it's just too expensive. It's cool though. I love old cards that find new value. And I think this could be one of those, and it would be one of those if it was one in a blue, for the activation. I don't mind paying 3 for this initially, but paying 3 again, that's a little tough. If you could just pay 2 to keep the bouncing back, I would try to find a deck to play this. It still probably wouldn't work, but I would at least try to find a deck to play this. Still, for 17 cents, I think you could try this in a deck and see how it works. It would just have to be a very slow environment, which it probably wouldn't be. Oh, I need to give a score to this thing. Again, it's actually kind of similar to the other one. I think this is even better than our last card. I'd give this a 4.5. It's like just on the cusp of being playable, but it needs a little something more before it can really be playable. Card number 3. I also need to be marking down where we are in the cards. This is the third one. That is Ceradon Yearling. It's 2 mana, which is a red and a white, Boros colors, for a 2/2 beast. It's got vigilance, it's got haste, and that's all it can do. It's not the worst stats. It's haste is good. Haste is good for sure. Vigilance isn't bad. I don't know if haste and vigilance are necessarily the best combo. I mean, it's not a terrible combo. The problem is that this is a 2/2, and I think if it was a 2/3, the vigilance would feel a lot better. Just to have that extra point of toughness, you feel like you can block a little bit more. 2 toughness isn't great, but the real problem is it's just a French vanilla creature. French vanilla meaning that it's got some keywords, but it doesn't have like any actual real abilities, or unique abilities in that way, and that's just not going to be good enough for Pauper. It's a cool card. Like I would play this in a limited deck, easy. I think it makes a lot of sense for something like that, but yeah, it just doesn't find a home in a Pauper deck. It's like a 2.4 or something. Like it's a perfectly fine card. It just doesn't go in a deck. Ooh, here we go. Here's a Pauper card. Put in sideboard. You'll play this one. It's a Troublemaker Oof. It costs 1 and a green for a 2/2 Oof. And it also has Bargain. Bargain, I think this is our first Bargain card we've looked at. Bargain says you can sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token as you cast this spell. Why would you want to do that? Well, read on. When this creature enters, if it was bargained, you can exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. So that's okay on its own, right? It's like a naturalize effect or a disenchant effect, but it exiles. The exiling is a little bit better. But the idea is that Naturalize already costs 2 mana, and you can just destroy those things. Is that really that big of a deal? But what you get here is that the exile means that you can hit the indestructible artifact lands, the dual artifact lands, and those are really popular in Pauper. There's the Jund Wildfire decks that want to use the Cleansing Wildfire. That's the card. Use Cleansing Wildfire to destroy an artifact or destroy a land, destroy a non-basic land, and then you get to draw a card, and you also the owner of that non-basic land gets to go find a basic land and put it into play. But when you have the artifact lands, it means you try to destroy it. It's indestructible, so it still lives, but then you still get the land anyway. So it's kind of like giving yourself a rampant growth plus a card when you use it on yourself. Or you can also use it on an opponent to slow down their non-basic lands if they're playing like a Gates deck or something like that. But it's like those are really popular lands because Jund Wildfire is a thing, or because Affinity is a thing, and you just want extra artifacts, and it's really nice when your lands can also be artifacts. But if you're trying to combat that, having something that can exile artifacts is now not only exiling artifacts or enchantments, which can also be good against Bogle's decks or other decks that use pretty solid enchantments, but you're exiling those things. So even though the land might be indestructible, you're still exiling it anyway. So it takes that land away. You're taking away a land, and when you're taking away land drops from somebody, that's a hell of a thing. And all you have to do is sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token. Some decks find that to be a positive. Being able to get rid of, again, if you're playing like a Simic deck and you've got Cryogen Relic, you are sacrificing your Cryogen Relic. That draws you a card because it left the battlefield, and you get to exile one of their lands. That's a really solid deal for 2 mana. That's pretty good. People do that. There's also all sorts of food tokens and clue tokens and things like that in Pauper as well. And those also make really good bargain fodder for that. This is a great card for sideboards. If you're playing green, this is one you should really consider. And I'll score it accordingly. This is like a 6.8, I think. It's very solid. Troublemaker Roof. New-ish card from Wilds of Eldraine. And a good one. Moving on to Coffin Purge, which is 1 black mana for an instant. It exiles target card from a graveyard. And then you can flash it back for 1 black mana and do the same thing. This is okay. This is all right. There's Graveyard Hate is very important in Pauper. There's a lot of decks currently. If it's not banned soon, which I have to feel like there's going to be some bans soon for the Balustrade Spy deck. Balustrade Spy probably specifically is the card that has to go. But that is a deck that is all about putting a bunch of stuff in your graveyard and then bringing a big Lotleth Giant out to murder an opponent. There's also your Tolarian Terror decks, which I talk a lot about, which want to have instants and sorceries in the graveyard, so you can pay for the Tolarian Terror and the Cryptic Serpent. You can pay a lot less to bring those in. There's the Gurmag Angler, which is Delve, which is exiling a bunch of stuff from your graveyard to be able to pay costs. So it's nice to have Graveyard Hate. The problem is there's much more efficient Graveyard Hate than this. There's like Fairy Macabre, which you can just discard that card from your hand, and it does it at instant speed. Now you're only getting 1, where this one can get you 2 cards, but you can also do that one for free. That's good. There's like Tormod's Crypt or Relic of Progenitus or Neil Spellbomb that can exile an entire graveyard, or Bajuka Bog. There's so many options there that just exile an entire graveyard, and you don't have to worry about getting individual cards. But this is one of the cheaper effects to just knock out a couple of cards if you need to specifically target a couple of cards. Like Relic of Progenitus is great because you can pay 1 mana to bring it in, 1 mana of any color, and then you can pay 1 mana and you tap it and sack it, or you exile it. I think you might exile it, but it exiles all graveyards. And if you're also doing a graveyard specific deck, then that can hurt you too. So it's sometimes nice to have more targeted removal. So Coffin Purge could be useful, but I just went down a big list of all these other graveyard hate pieces that are generally better than this. But this is solid. It's like a 4. It's a perfectly solid one of these. Like if you're, I was gonna say if you're going for like a budget version, and you're in Pauper, you're already budget. But Relic of Progenitus is like a $4 or $5 card, even ahead common rarity. Whereas this costs you 27 cents. You got 27 cents, right? You buy a bunch of copies of this instead of buying one Relic of Progenitus, but it's still $4. Go ahead and get your copies of Relic of Progenitus over this. All right, let's keep on moving to Blitz Automaton, which is 7 mana for an artifact creature construct, but you don't just have to pay 7 for it. So if you pay the full 7, you get a 6/4 with haste. If you pay its prototype cost, which is 2 and a red, it becomes a 3/2 instead of a 6/4, but it still has haste. So prototype says you can cast this spell with this different mana cost and color and size, but it keeps all of its abilities and types. So it will always be a construct. It will always have haste, but you can pay a little bit less to make it a smaller creature, but also, cost 3 instead of 7. I think prototype's really cool. It's a really nice way of getting kind of a modular card in your hand. Yes, like you draw this early in the game. Okay, it's a 3/2 with haste, but you draw it late in the game. Whoa, it's a 6/4 with haste. That's pretty cool. That's nice that you wouldn't just have a dead draw at the end of the game when you draw something like this, or you wouldn't have a dead draw at the beginning of the game where you need something smaller. So it's cool that it fills a couple of different roles like that. The other cool thing about all the prototype creatures is that you could play them for the prototype cost, the smaller cost, and then you could blink them. And when you blink them or reanimate them, they come back from the graveyard as well. When you do that, it comes back to its main version. It goes back to the 6/4 version with haste. So that's kind of neat. Like, just imagine. And with this having haste, that's even better. So you could play this in like a red blue deck, an Izzet deck that uses something like Planar Incision or any other sort of ghostly flicker that could also work. Where you just flicker this, flicker. What was I trying to say? And you just flicker this away. It comes right back to the battlefield, and now it's a 6/4 with haste instead of the 3/2. And because it has haste, you just attack right down in. That's pretty neat. A 3/2 that can turn into a 6/4. That's pretty neat. I don't think the 6/4 version is quite good enough to make this card all that usable. But there are certain strategies I could see working decently well with this. Like you could play this in a deck that is trying to cascade, and you need to have something like a Pilipala is a card from Shadowmoor, I believe, and that card costs 3 mana or 2 mana, I think. So you try to cascade into that because you can do some cool infinite combo stuff with it. So you don't want to have anything else that costs 2 mana because you want to use your cascade card that costs 3 and cascade into the 2 mana card every time. You want to guarantee that. So this is a way of having a card be more expensive. Like you're never going to be able to cascade this because it costs 7. So you'd need something that costs 8 that has cascade. But you can still draw it in the early game and use it for its prototype cost instead. It's kind of cool. It's a neat little tech piece in that way. But even so, I think you probably reach for other prototype creatures or other cards that have similar alternative mana costs before you'd reach for Blitz Automaton. I like it though. I like brewing it in my brain. I think it's got something cool there. I would like to try to find a way to build a deck out of this that could use this to good effect. I think that's what Pauper's all about. But this one specifically, probably not quite good enough. I'll give it a 3.9. I think it's got something, but it just doesn't have enough of that something. Titanic Brawl is our next card. It costs 1 and a green for an instant that says this spell costs 1 less to cast if it targets a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it, and target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. It's cool to have an instant speed fight effect. It's cool that fight effect can cost 1 or cost 1 green rather than costing 2, like a lot of fight spells can cost. I would say the fight spells that cost 1, like Bushwhack, those are all sorceries. I don't think there are any, maybe just many. There might be one that I'm just not thinking of, but there aren't a whole lot of instant speed fight effects that cost 1. And it's cool that this one can. Now you do have to fill a condition, but that condition is relatively easy to fill in Pauper. There's lots of things that give +1/+1 counters. That's a pretty popular deck type, or not even really a deck type. It's just stuff that you often get. Like you'll get +1/+1 counters from having the initiative. You'll get +1/+1 counters from map tokens. You can get +1/+1 counters from things entering the battlefield. There's lots of ways to get +1/+1 counters. Unexpected Fangs can put a +1/+1 counter on something. So there's plenty of ways to get 1/1 counters, and then this becomes a whole lot cheaper. And because it has a 1/1 counter, it's probably a more useful thing to use a fight with, because it has that extra toughness and extra attack to be able to kill the opponent's thing and keep your creature alive. I think this is good. I think this is good. It probably is underplayed in this format, but you generally would want a deck that has a lot of ways to get 1/1 counters on things, because you generally don't want to spend the 2 mana for this effect if you didn't have to. It's not the worst, but I think generally there's better options in green, or more generalized options in green. But I could see this being a really solid card in a green deck that has a 1/1 counter theme, and has a lot of big creatures. I have one of those decks that, well, I guess it doesn't have 1/1 counters, but it does have a lot of big green creatures. And, I could see this slotting in for, something like a Ram Through instead, or what's that fight spell? Or I think it's a bite spell that it's if you control an Eldrazi, you gain 3 life from Modern Horizons 3. There's some options there, but this is another pretty good option. I think it's a solid card. It's actually kind of close to the last one that we saw, in that it's better than that. This gets up into a 4 range. This is like a 4 point. Man, it might actually be okay. I'd give this like a 4.6. It doesn't quite hit the usability, but it's right up there. This would make a really good replacement if you didn't have another good fight or bite spell, and you had this. Yeah, go ahead and slot it in. Give it a try. How many more do we got? We have 2 more cards, I think. No, 3 more cards. 3 more cards. And we've got Hollow Dogs coming up right now, originally from Urza Saga. Look at that. I mean, it's the same art, but it does just look better at Urza Saga. Cost you a whole dime. Whole dime for that one. Whenever Hollow Dogs attacks, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. It costs you 4 and a black, of course. Sorry, it's a Phyrexian zombie dog. It used to just be hounds, but now it's a Phyrexian zombie dog, and it's a 3/3. Let's go back to the 8th or 9th edition here. 7th edition. Ooh, yeah. I like 7th edition. Some 7th edition cards look real good, and they have that new art treatment and everything from 7th edition. I think Hollow Dogs is a big miss from 7th edition. This, which is probably why they went back in 9th and said, let's go back to the good art. Let's go back to that art that people like. Yeah, I'm sure we'll find a good 7th edition art that I can talk about, like a sleight of hand. Ooh, 7th edition sleight of hand, that's a card, baby. Anyway, Holodogs, that's what we're talking about right now. It's not great, right? Costs 5 mana in Pauper. You want that card to do quite a bit, and this doesn't. It comes on the table as a 3/3. And it stays a 3/3 until your next turn, and even then it has to attack, and even then it's a 5/3 for 5. That's not a really good rate. Certainly not a really good rate anymore. I don't even think it was that great of a rate in Urza Saga. The best thing about this card is the art. So good job, Jeff Miracula. But the card not quite up to snuff. I'll give this a 2.2. Crystal Grotto. This card's not bad. It's a land. When this land enters, you scry 1, you can tap for colorless, or you can filter mana through it. You can pay 1, tap it, and add a mana of any color. So filtering is nice. You like filtering. It comes in untapped. That's also nice. Nothing wrong with that. The issue here is that it scries. And that's not bad. Scry's pretty good. You look at your top card, you can choose whether to keep it on top, you can put it on the bottom. The problem comes in is that I think there are 2 lands. One of them is from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. I can't remember where the other one's from. But I believe there are 2 lands that do basically the same effect. Come in untapped, tap for colorless, or can filter mana, but they surveil instead. And surveilling, where you can look at the top card and then choose whether to keep that on top or put it in your graveyard, those are just much better than scrying. Surveils almost universally are better, because there are a lot of graveyard decks that would rather put that card in the graveyard or have the option to put that card in the graveyard. Again, your Tolarian Terror decks, your Dredge decks, your Balustrade Spy decks, lots of different things that just like having the option to throw something in the graveyard, and that's just better than the scry. It's too bad. I like the name of this card. I like the art. I generally like what it does, but for the most part, you're gonna if you want this effect, you can get up to 8 cards in your deck that do this, that do the surveil instead of the scry. And I don't think you need 12 copies of a card like this. So you just take the 8 that are slightly better than this one. And that's a little too bad. But I will still give this a solid 5, right down the middle. I think this is a good card. And if you don't have those surveil ones, this is kind of just the next best thing. Just know that it's not the best thing in that situation. All right, this is the final card of the day, and it is Magma Hellion. It costs 6 and a red. That's 7 whole mana for a 5/4 Hellion, and it's got assist. So another player can pay up to 6 of this spell's mana cost. And it's got trample and haste. So this is from Battle Bond. And Battle Bond was a set that's specifically meant to be played 2-on-2. So the idea is that your partner will be able to pay some of this mana cost for you to be able to get this big creature out. So you could get this thing out much earlier than you'd be able to on your own. And that's kind of cool. And at that point, if they're ponying up 3 mana and you pony up 4 of it, or they pony up 5 and you pony up 2, whatever, being able to do that allows you, like, makes the stat line of 5/4 with trample haste pretty good. Makes a little bit more sense. But this is Pauper. This is a 1-on-1 format. And I don't think your opponent is going to give you any of their mana for you to pay this spell's mana cost. And at that point, you're paying 7 mana for a 5/4 trample haste, and that's not nearly good enough. There are so many other cards that you'd play over this. So unfortunately, in this format, it gets a really low score. In Battle Bond, it still would get a relatively low score, but it makes more sense in that format. So with all that in mind, I think this gets like a 1.5. Yeah, 5/4 trample haste. There's just other cards that do that for at least 2 mana cheaper. Yeah, it's too bad. I'm feeling a little generous. Let's do a bonus card. I'm having a good time. Let's play. And we get Elven Liar from Fallen Empires. In Fallen Empires, this was a rare. So it must be pretty bad, right? If this online Masters Edition bumped it all the way down to common. Ooh, let's see what this is like. It is part of the reserve list. So maybe it's really good. Maybe it was too good for Wizards to ever print again. So I mean, it is also under $1. I haven't looked at what this card does at all. So I'm just going in blind, trying to think about, like, is this card good? Is this card bad? You know, it was a rare. That's good. It's on the reserve list. That's good. I mean, it's not good, but it is an indicator that the card might be good. It was only printed in Fallen Empires. That's not necessarily bad. It was printed in Fallen Empires. Okay, that's an indicator of it being bad. It's 57 cents. That's an indicator of it being bad. And it dropped all the way down to common. It didn't even drop down to uncommon. They just went right to common. So this... All right, let's stop stalling. Elven Liar is 2 mana for an artifact. You can then pay 1 and tap it to sacrifice this artifact, and target creature gets +2/+2 until the end of the turn. Oh. Yeah, yep. That's on the reserve list, ladies and gentlemen. That's not good. That's really not good. Do you want to pay 3 mana for a giant growth, except it's for 2/3 of a giant growth? You want to pay 3 mana for 2/3 of a giant growth? No. Why would you pay 3 times as much for something that's only 2/3 as good? That's bad. Hey, Kaya Folio, good job. Good job on the art. It's cool. The name sounds like it should be a good card, right? Elven Liar? Like, man, that should do something. And the truth is, it does nothing good. I mean, +2/+2 at instant speed is fine. It's not good though. It's just straight up not good. This is a 1.1. I'm not just gonna give it a straight 1, but it's nope. You don't want to do that. This should not go in your Pauper deck. God, this took the rare slot in Fallen Empires. I mean, Fallen Empires, not a fantastic set for power level. I wonder if there are any Fallen Empires cards that are useful in Pauper. My guess is no, but there always could be one. Maybe we'll do like a set review sometime and just look through all the cards of a single set. But at least in this instance, we know that this card is not a very useful Fallen Empires card. And for that, we'll give it that 1.1. All right. Thanks so much for joining. We'll be back next time on Common Knowledge. See you then.